it's 7 o'clock, so everybody's winding down for the night,
Yeah,
and I have some quiet for the first time in a while. So
that's good.
yes, yes,
So just to get started, would you like to introduce yourself for anyone who might not know who you are?
sure. My name is Linny Mack. I am a debut contemporary romance author. I have a book coming out in May 6th, 2025, called Changing Tides, and it is the first book in what we're calling the Kate May series. So I'm really excited about that. It follows a group of friends that are in their 30s and 40s, and they've known each other since childhood. So this first book is super exciting. It's about Liam and Sophie, and I can't wait till it comes out.
I'm actually looking forward to reading this book. Sounds really good.
Yay! That's great.
What inspired Changing Tides?
Well, so if you ask my best friend, she'll tell you that I told her when we met I was going to write a book. And I vaguely remember that. But I was at a point in my life where um, I had raised my kids. Well, all my kids went to school, and I was feeling like a little bit lost as far as what do I do now.
Mhm.
And so I just sort of started putting it out there to the universe. I manifested, if you will, um, looking for like what's next for me. And I have a degree in literature. I used to teach high school. Um, I'm a reader, a voracious reader. So I just thought, let me sit down and try my hand at writing. And I wrote about Cape May because Cape May is close to where I grew up. It's a place that's super special to my husband and and I knew I wanted to write a romance about people who have lived a little. And
Yeah.
so I started with just a list of characters and described people. There's little traits of people I know in every character, and the story sort of just developed from there. I honestly feel like it poured right out of me, and it's kind of strange to say because I am like a plotter. I do outline my stories, but this just was like one that was bursting to come out. So,
But that's good. You didn't have to think too much.
yeah, I mean, I definitely did do some thinking, but
But
more
yeah.
like um, once it once it got rolling, it was like fun to think about where the story was going. So yeah.
Did you always know that think you'll end up being an author, or what drew you to writing in the first place?
In seventh grade, I had to write a story. We were learning about the Holocaust, and
Mm.
I wrote a story about a girl. I was very inspired by the Diary of Anne Frank. I wrote a story about a girl who lived through the Holocaust, and my teacher loved it so much. She's actually part of my, I'm going to give her the dedication and send her a copy of the book because she loved it so much that she like read it to all of her classes. She raved
Mhm.
about it. And then she said, I hope you're going to consider writing, um, when you grow up. And that always kind of stayed with me. I was always the kid that was like hiding in my room, writing stories in notebooks, and then forcing my parents to listen to me read them out loud. And then in high school, I had a computer and I would print out all the stories and do the same thing and cut characters out of catalogs and like I don't know. It was just always something I did. I never really knew how a book was made until I wrote this. And then, okay, well, what do I do now? And so, like, I had to do the research. Do I want to self publish? Do I want to find an agent? Ended up going the agent route. But did I actually think it would happen? No. the whole thing was sort of like, the whole thing was sort of a whirlwind. I found my agent very quickly. We clicked from the start. Um, we edited a little bit together and we went on submission this past June 2024 and we sold the book in the series in October. So it
Oh.
was kind of
Very
like
quick.
I thought it was like a pipe dream. I
Mm.
honestly, it's funny. My husband, when I started writing it, he said, well, this is a fun little hobby for you.
No,
I
not
was like,
quite a hobby now.
well, you don't really write a book for a hobby.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, I'm sure some people do, but I had hoped to do something with it. So it's kind of exciting to see, that it's happening. And I still have to pinch myself.
Did you always think you were going to go romance, or were you always sort of like a fantasy sort of reader or another genre?
I'm not a fantasy reader. I have a really hard time. I have always liked realistic fiction, like
Mhm.
something that could actually happen, or historical fiction. But I'm a big romance reader, and I will read a thriller from time to time. My book club likes thrillers, but usually after I read a thriller, I need something like light and spicy,
You need to cleanse the palate
So
after a thriller.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I feel like romance is it. But then when people ask me like, "Oh, what do you write?" I feel like a little silly sometimes, like, "Oh, I write romance." But I've always been a happily ever after, stop and smell the roses kind of person. So romance suits me.
That's fair. How did you choose which characters to center the story around?
So my main character, Sophie, she was pretty easy to write. And I don't want to say she was like modeled after me, but I wanted her to be coming off of like something heartbreaking. And the story begins with her discovering her husband having an affair, um, after they've been married for 13 years, and she struggled with infertility for 7 years. And infertility is something that I struggled with. Um, Thankfully, now I have three beautiful children, but it was a dark time for me.
Mm.
And I wanted her to be realistic and relatable. I think sometimes infertility is still something that a lot of people don't talk about.
No.
Um, and so Sophie is recovering from this like explosion in her world essentially. And so writing those feelings was kind of easy. I mean, I could relate because I had been through the infertility. I have not thankfully had to deal with an affair, but the character of Sophie was easy to write. And then her counterpart Liam is also recovering from a trauma that happened in his youth, and he carries it around on his shoulders, and it's drastically affected his life in adulthood. And so the two of them sort of trauma bond, after initially not getting off on the right foot. And I don't know, I would say writing the male point of view is a little trickier. Sometimes I'll read a passage to my husband and he'll say, men wouldn't say that. So, um, you know, but I would say, yeah, I mean, they're not really based off of anybody that I know in particular, but just experiences that I've had and people that I've met, have, their qualities have trickled in a little bit.
I always thought like writing a male point of view would be a bit difficult. So I'm like glad there's like you have a sounding board to go, now this sound this sound
Yeah,
right?
that's true. And actually my husband is not a reader. He currently does not have sight in one eye. And so if I want his opinion on something I've written, I usually have to read it out loud to him. It's a great way to catch weird phrases and mistakes in your writing. But yeah, writing the male point of view is hard, but also I love it. I don't know why. I like to write a man that needs fixing, and all of my male characters need a little bit of fixing. So I don't know.
It keeps makes the story though. They can't just be perfect
Yeah,
right from the first
yeah,
page.
absolutely.
What was the process of writing your book? You say that
Um,
you're more of a plotter than a pantser.
I'm definitely more of a plotter, although sometimes near like the middle or the end, it kind of evolves into both. But generally my process is I figure out who I want to be in the book first. I make a cast of characters and their qualities. And I just think that when you have that written down and you know who you're writing about, it's easier than if you just start free writing. So I initially made a group of characters and said, okay, well, all of these people are friends, they live in the same neighborhood, and they've known each other forever, and I've described each person. And then I start loosely outlining, like I know what I want the big things to be that happen. This book, it's funny. I knew I wanted it to be in Cape May. I love a twist of fate, and there is a twist of fate in the end of the book that I think will surprise most people. That twist of fate came because my best friend lives next door to me, and she's been my first alpha reader. She read the very first chapter and every chapter since. And we used to take walks. I have a golden retriever that's very rambunctious. And so we would go on our evening walk, put the kids to bed, and it's, summertime, so it's still light out, and we're taking nice leisurely walks, and we're talking through this book and these plot points. And so many of the things that made it into the book were suggestions from her, that I would go back and like put them into my outline and try to figure out how they work. And so I do need like alpha readers and people to talk through the plot points with. Um, just to make sure that I'm coming, like there's no holes and I'm going full circle. So I would say start with the characters, do the outline, and then I write. But if something changes while I'm writing, that's okay. Like today, I'm writing the end of my second release. And there's a scene at the end where it's after like a third act breakup. And I was thinking, like, they're separated, he's crushed, she's mad. I don't like, I needed to have them see each other again to have that tension in there. And I hadn't planned for that. But today it came out. So there it is.
You need the
So there's,
flexibility.
for sure, for sure. So the outline helps, but then definitely things veer off course sometimes.
Do you do much of world building? I know it's based with Kate May, but do you do a lot of character building before you start writing?
So the characters are definitely built before I start writing. I One thing that's really cool about a rough draft is that you can get the story just poured out on paper, but by the time you're done writing it, you really know your characters, and you can start with like rough plot points or sorry, rough character traits
Mm.
that you want them to have. Like Liam, I know he wanted to have a trauma. I know I wanted him to be broken from it and feel undeserving of love and things of that sort. But by the time I got to the end of the book, I felt like I knew him really well. So then when I went back to edit, it came much more naturally to me, as opposed to just changing words around or line edits or things of that sort. And actually in the publishing process and in doing the edits with my editor, so much of his arc shifted. Like he is still broken and broody, but like a little bit less prickly than he started out as. So I'm getting a weird error on my computer. So hopefully it doesn't. Oh boy, I don't know. Let's just get out of it. Okay. So he started out one way, but then by the end of it, I definitely knew more about him. As far as world building goes, I don't build like worlds I don't know. I write what I know. So most of the places in the books are real places. Some of them I've made up because, I needed a yoga studio and there isn't one that's the way I wanted it to be. So I made it up. But as far as like fantasy world building, it's not the same. In fact, if I read a fantasy, I I don't think I would know where to start to write one.
Mm. I think that'd be a much more complicated process to do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's easier to write what you know in a world that you don't.
Yes. Yes. And writing realistic fiction is a completely different game than writing, fantasy or science fiction or anything like that, which is just it's never been what I've read.
Yeah.
So I I wouldn't know how to go about writing it. I'm sure I could tackle it, but it wouldn't come as naturally to me.
Might take a bit longer to
I
do.
don't think anyone would buy it.
Did
So,
you have a favorite moment to write in Changing Tides?
oh, the twist at the end is it's a moment where Sophie finds something and without thinking, without taking her cell phone, without doing anything logical. She just flees. And when the reader gets the whole twist at the end, it's just, oh, it's so satisfying. So,
You need
and
that fun.
the epilogue ties everything up. And I think everybody will be really satisfied with the way the book ends.
You need that definitely in a romance.
Yes.
Has writing and publishing a book changed the way you see yourself?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I said, when I started, I was feeling super lost. As far as like, I'm in my late 30s. I actually turned 40 in like 3 weeks, and I didn't know what my place was. Like, do I go back to the workforce? I've been home with my kids for 8 years, and um, I wanted to try something different. And then being able to achieve it, for sure. It's still not completely real to me. And there's moments of major imposter syndrome. I think the imposter syndrome never goes away, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're querying on submission or actually have a book deal and a book coming out. Like, I'm gonna be able to hold my book in a month, 2 months. I don't know when I'm gonna get the hard copy of it, but um I think like that moment will be full circle for me, where I will be like, this is the hardest and the coolest thing I've ever done. Um, it varies day to day as far as like, should I really be doing this? Like, do do I really have a good book here? It's funny, like when I first got the edits and I was reading through the edit letter and all the notes from there was two editors that worked on it. I was like, oh my God, do they even like this? You know what I mean? It was just a moment where I was like, okay, like, yes, I did something cool, but there's all these steps in the process that continue to make it better. And so many people that like weigh in and help make it the best it can be, that I think keeps me in line. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'll ever be like, yeah, I'm awesome, I wrote 3 books. I don't know that I'll ever get there and think like I'm up there with, the best-selling authors. But I do think it's really cool. And I frequently remind myself that not many people do sit down to write a book and then actually have a product at the end of it. So I do feel excited and proud for that. And it's cool to see my kids tell everybody that their mom's an author. But, I think it's still, there's still a big part of it that doesn't feel real to me yet.
Yeah, it's not your book's not in your hand yet to sort of see the final product.
Yes. The funny thing is I just got the EPUB file to put it on my Kindle that the authors who are going to be giving me blurbs have. So my agent sent me the file too, and it's on my Kindle, and it's in my Kindle library, and there's a cover and the formatting is there. And I was like, this is as real as it gets. Like, I'm not holding the paper book, but like it's in here. It's in here, yeah, next to Emily Henry and Abby Jimenez. So like it's kind of cool to see that. But it's still like, my husband calls them micro moments. He's like, you have to enjoy all these little micro moments as they come, because you will forget, or you won't forget if just take the time to soak it in. So I'm trying to do that
It's the first,
while
like
still keeping my feet on the ground.
Are there any books or authors that inspired you in your writing?
There are a lot of really wonderful romance authors. Auto-buy romance authors for me are Carly Fortune, Emily Henry, Abby Jimenez. I buy them every time they have a book come out. I have a critique partner that I met on Twitter earlier in 2024. And when she finished reading Changing Tides, she called it a soul book. And she said it reminded her so much of something that they would write. And so, I mean, I guess if those are the books that I read, then maybe I write similarly. So I would say Abby Jimenez for sure is a big inspiration. She writes, I like that her plot lines have something deeper going on, usually besides just the romance, and you'll
Mm.
find that in mine as well. So she's probably one of my biggest inspirations, sure.
You definitely need something more than just the romance to get hook and keep readers coming back
You
for
do, you
more.
do. And I will say there, there's a place for the romance for sure,
Mhm.
but I like it when the plot is driven by multiple
Yeah.
things. So that's generally what I try to do. At the end of the day, of course, there's a happily ever after and there's some love scenes, but it's not a love scene every other chapter or anything like that. So there's definitely a solid plot there.
That's good. What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
Ooh, don't stop. I would say, like, when you think it's done, it's probably not. And don't be afraid to take feedback. Don't be afraid of beta readers, of agent feedback. Right before I met my agent, she had requested to read, and then I sent it to her. And then, like 2 days later, another agent who I really admired rejected me. And she said, in the beginning, there's a whole lot of, what we call info dumping in the industry. And I think you would do well to revise this. And so I did. I revised it and then I offered it to my agent. I said, I know you have this version. I just did a whole rework of the beginning. Would you like to see that? And she did, and then she offered. So I think being willing to take feedback is a huge thing, especially if you want to go the traditional route. You can't be, yes, of course, keep your story, as the core
Mm.
of what you want it to be, but take the feedback from the experts because that's what they're there for. And the book that is being published is probably the 11th version of Changing Tides, and it would not be what it is without the help of my editor, my publisher, my agent. And then the other advice I would say is while you're doing all of those things, keep writing because I wrote another book in between this one and I was ready to go on sub with it if no one took this. We were just kind of waiting and I didn't want to write the second book in the series in case I couldn't sell this. So I wrote a complete standalone and it got me through. It got me through the query and it got me through the submission process because I had something to focus on besides my email inbox. So those are my two big pieces of advice. It can be um, publishing is a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a slow process. Because think about it, you're sending your work a lot of words. Mine's 90,000 words. You're sending it to be read by people, and you have to wait for them to read it. And then you have to wait for them to like it, and then get other people to like it. And the whole thing is just really slow. So if you have other things to focus on, it'll be the best for your mental health,
I
for
think
sure.
also, I think definitely the feedback. I know a lot of people struggle with accepting feedback, and you have to have tough skin, especially
Oh, yes.
in writing.
The thick skin. And I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I got some rejections that were like, oh, I'm reluctantly passing, or, that said, they didn't like something about it or they liked it, but just not enough.
Mm.
That, if you focus on those little things with no tangible feedback to actually like do anything with, that is, that can be really devastating. I would say being on submission, and not many people say this out loud, but I'm going to say it. I probably cried daily from weeks 1 through 10. Like the first 10 weeks of submission were absolute torture for me. Just thinking like I was going to be one of those people that, oh, I got the deal in 2 weeks. And that wasn't the reality. I did find an agent quickly, but that kind of skewed my perception of what it was going to be like. It was a real learning curve for me to accept that I had to wait. I had to wait. So I had to keep my mind busy. That's
I
all
think
there is
waiting
to
is
it.
the hardest.
The wait is the hardest. Yes, let's hurry up and wait. And then publishing moves very slowly until it
Mm.
doesn't. And then it's fast and you got to do things quickly. So, it's just a very interesting career, but it's been a whirlwind and it's been really exciting and I wouldn't trade any of it. But I definitely think the feedback is important. You have to be able to take the feedback. Or else if you don't want the feedback, then there is the self-publishing route. For
Mm.
me, I just really wanted the validation of a publisher saying, "We like this. We want to put it in bookstores." That to me was my measure of success. So it just depends what your goals are.
Mm, definitely. What's your favorite writing snack or drink if you have one?
Oh, I always have a coffee. Always. I'm probably over caffeinated every day and it's a real problem because then I stay up and I write late into the night and then I don't get enough sleep and then I start the vicious cycle all over again. I've and caffeine, deters your hunger, so I
Yeah,
eat a lot while I write, but there's always a coffee or an iced coffee next to me.
can't go wrong with a nice iced coffee or
I
coffee.
know. It's 12 degrees here right now, but I would still have an iced coffee. I'm inside.
Still good. Still good to have. You can have one
Yeah,
anytime, really. Doesn't depend matter what temperature.
exactly. Exactly.
Do you play music while you write? And if you do, what's your favorite type of music?
Okay, so this is a two-part question. I don't Two-part answer. I don't play music for enjoyment while I
Mhm.
write. My favorite band in the world is Zach Brown Band, and I have seen him probably like 12 times in concert. I just bought tickets for this year yesterday. Um, I can't listen to music for enjoyment while I'm writing, but I do listen to, ever since I heard this podcast from Mel Robbins on this like sound wave that you listen to for focus. They're called binaural beats and they're all over Spotify. So I put Spotify on, I type in binaural beats for focus, and I pop in my earbuds, especially if I'm somewhere like I write often at my children's sports. So pop in the earbuds, put on the focus sound waves, and I can just zone completely out, which is awesome. So I highly recommend that podcast from Mel Robbins and B, listening to binaural beats when you need to focus because it's just sound waves and you don't need to listen to it super loudly.
Mm.
But for some reason, your brain is just opened up.
Mm. That's really good. And I know some people either write in complete silence or they have like instrumentals going. So it's always interesting to hear what everyone does.
Yeah, yeah.
And my last question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Oh, I don't know. I have a lot of supporters. My husband, who thought it was a hobby initially, he's been super excited about the whole process for me, and he's in the professional marketing world, and he has lots of great ideas and ways to help me get myself out there. So he's very supportive in that way. My best friend, I'm so fortunate because she lives next door to me, and so she reads everything. She gets excited. She hypes it up. When I was in the query trenches, she was like, "Oh, every rejection is getting you closer to the right agent," and always cheering me on. And then when I was waiting to get, to be on sub and to get a deal, she would say, "I know this book is going to be published. I feel it in my soul." So she's definitely my number one hype girl. And then of course, I have very supportive parents and other friends and family too. So I really can't complain. Everybody that heard I was writing a book was supportive. Nobody scoffed at me or thought it was strange, at least not to my face. So,
That's really good. You do
good,
need
yeah.
everyone close to you to be supportive and hype you up, which is really good.
For sure, for sure. And especially pull me up when I'm feeling like maybe I can't hack it. And those feelings, they do come. Like they're very real still. And I tell all authors at all stages of the process that imposter syndrome, it just comes and goes.
Yeah,
So but I'm fortunate that I do have a good village that will say to me, like, you're fine, you're good, you've got this. So
you don't need to worry about it.
yeah.
And that's really good. Thank you. That was my last question as well. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
good. No, thank you for having me on. You're my first ever interview, and I'm kind of like a nervous rambler,
No,
so
it's
um,
completely fine.
but it was cool. It was very cool. So I appreciate you having me. And if anybody wants to follow my Instagram, is the platform I'm on the most. I'm at Linny Mack Writes, and I do say stuff on Threads sometimes. That's really the only platform you'll find me. I do have a Twitter and a TikTok, but it's too many things. So you'll find me most places on Instagram, and I hope you'll follow along and check out the books, check them out. So May 6th is release day. I'm very excited.
I actually really can't wait.